I will briefly go through the agenda just to get an overview on what we expect today. I structured this webinar into 4 parts. A very short introduction, which we call Why Objective-Driven Improvement, will underline the need to have process improvements aligned with business objectives. We will go briefly into some background from process improvement. I will also introduce to an example which we follow up throughout this webinar. The example is from global software development, because that's something which most of us are engaged today. And in this first part, I will show some obstacles. Later on, I will show how to do it right. The next part is implementing objective-driven improvement, very briefly giving the highlights, what it is, how it works, and how it is best applied. And then the major part will go down into detailing how objective-driven process improvement is applied to this case study, which is about supplier management in a distributed software development. This will certainly be the major part and take most time. And finally, we'll have the lessons learned, which is wrapping up the results. And obviously, there's then the question and answer session, which we have in these webinars. Well, very briefly, the challenges, and I will be fast on this part because you mostly know it. On one side, software engineering, independent whether it's now IT or embedded software or software which supports products, is for most of us biggest investment in major business enabled. However, what we often see in our own development is that we have advanced technologies, but historically evolved organization with organic processes, where we are considering discipline and processes as rather impacting creativity than supporting it, and also suboptimal architectures, components, and solutions. Very clearly, we have to continuously improve performance. We have a worldwide competition. We have a war on prices, and as we are all aware, the entry barriers are extremely low in the field of software, independent which application domain. And this is exactly the challenge where we are in. On the one side, strong technology, but not really aligned processes. On the other side, the need to improve efficiency and continuously improve the quality and renovate the portfolio. The dilemma can also be shown in numbers which you are certainly aware, like those which we are seeing on this slide. I have sorted out from the latest Standish Group report, which is mostly IT projects in North America, which has currently a baseline of about 10,000 projects, where we see that also there is a strong improvement with about 1/3 of projects being successful. We still have a rather big amount, which is half, which is light or over budget. In other words, won't reach the originally committed objectives, and about 20% cancelled. Now, if we look to the root causes and the typical issues which we face, the number one, which appears again and again, independent whether we go into Standish Group or the numbers here on the bottom from Robert Jarrett, who is a well-known risk researcher, has done a lot of studies on and benchmarks on failed projects. Obviously, it's about process capability, which ranks first in the reason why projects are failing. And number two is organizational management, which is very closely related, which has to do with how do we know what to do, who has which role, responsibility, what are we doing on interfaces. And only number three starts with a technical topic, which is requirements engineering and requirements management. So very clearly, there is a need for process improvement, and there's a need for focused improvements. Now the good news, and that's if we compare Standish, for instance, over the timeline, but we can equally go to reports such as from the Software Engineering Institute or from benchmarks such the International Benchmarking Group, we find that there is certainly a very clear trend for process improvement. For instance, here on the upper part in the picture, we see the comparison of Spanish results from the past 12 years with a clear growth of a successful project. It's double compared to 94. If you go to the bottom part, we see also the potentials of process improvement, namely productivity improvement, cycle time reduction, quality improvement. One word of advice with all these numbers, these are ranges. This is not something which we expect in all projects. Normally, these will follow the targets which you set to an improvement project. And that's exactly the experience which I made in the past 15, 20 years when I've been working on process improvement topics with a number of different companies, which is that if we carefully plan, if we set realistic targets in a domain where we focus about reaching these objectives, there's a strong indication that we will reach it. In other words, if we take here the productivity high runner, which is about 300% of productivity improvement, and the details you find in that SEI report from 2006, it's clear that this case has been drawn from a company which focused entirely on productivity improvement, put all the energy on it, realized that certain processes have to be re-engineered, and they would not have gone into a huge debate on a variety of targets. They put their energy on this one target. If somebody else would say we have to cut cycle time to half, that's feasible. I've worked in very big engineering projects in telecommunication where we had an objective to cut cycle time to 50% in a 2-year time frame. Well, in the end it took 3 years, but we reached more than 50%. But our focus was during that time entirely on cycle time reduction, and we put our management attention on it. We renovated and re-engineered the processes, and that was possible. And that created the clear understanding that objective-driven improvement is the paradigm which brings us in the direction of achieving these targets. So process improvement obviously is still on the agenda, will remain there. I think we should also highlight this with all these failed projects that the whole discipline is not that very old, and we have a clear understanding of software engineering basically achieved from the 80s onwards, and the capability maturity model, which today is the most prominent framework, is now very clearly, very precisely 20 years old, has been used in many industries, is worldwide used, and we see that if it is used as a supportive instrument, then it's very obvious that process improvement objectives will be reached. So the recipes are available. We have frameworks, we have best practices, we have all these webinars of the AI which we always listen to. We have seen that ROI is attainable. Now the real challenge is why we still don't achieve these objectives. Now, the experience which I make, and this was the reason why we have this webinar today, is that we have 4 failures which reoccur. The first thing, we don't set clear targets. I often run into companies which would say, well, we need this CMMI maturity level 3 because our clients ask it. Or somebody else would say, we have to do this process improvement because we need to install a good management system or a good quality management system. However, with such targets, it's not obvious what to do, and certainly for the engineers which have to